So a new state just took direct aim at the National Firearms Act. South Dakota has officially passed a new law that removes firearm suppressors from its definition of controlled weapons, essentially meaning that suppressors are no longer criminalized under South Dakota state law. This all comes on the heels of what we have seen, states like Texas and Tennessee do with short-barreled rifles with their SBR freedom bills. And this also comes right in the middle of the nationwide effort to remove the remaining NFA restrictions because of the new $0 tax on NFA items. So let's break down what just happened in South Dakota, why this matters also for the larger trend of removing all the remaining NFA restrictions. Now, before we jump into this video, if you want to support the channel, one of the best ways to do that is simply to subscribe. You can also click the like button. If you're watching this video and you appreciate this type of content, hit the like button because that just tells the algorithm that you appreciate this content and it shares to more people. I also want to thank one of the main supporters of this channel, which is Attorneys on Retainer. When it comes to self-defense protection, in my opinion, AOR is in a league of their own. They're backed by an actual law firm, they're Attorneys for Freedom, and they're always trying to expand upon their benefits and give you the most for your membership. One of the new things that they added is they're guaranteeing 4 attorneys to your self-defense case, which is something that no one else offers. So again, if you're interested, check them out using the links down below. And if you use my code ARMSCHOLAR, you can get $25 off of your sign-up membership fee. Now, as I mentioned in the intro, in this video, we're going to be talking about a new law which was just passed, and it aims to remove state-level restrictions and criminalization on the possession of suppressors. South Dakota just passed Senate Bill 2. That is essentially an amendment within the state to amend the criminal code so that firearms suppressors and silencers are no longer included in the state definition of controlled weapons. Now, you may ask, why does this matter? Well, because essentially under prior South Dakota law, knowingly possessing a controlled weapon was a felony offense and could be charged at a state level. Now, suppressors under this new law are no longer in that category for the state. That means that there is no state felony for simple suppressor possession, no state level criminalization tied to the possession of those suppressors. At a state level, South Dakota has stepped back and said, we are not criminalizing suppressors and we are not going to have state level laws which go against these items. That is a major policy shift that we've seen South Dakota do. We've also seen some other states like Tennessee and Texas do very similar things when it comes to SBRs. Like I mentioned, you compare this with what Texas did with HB 2705, which was the SBR Freedom Bill. Texas removed short-barreled rifles and short-barreled shotguns from its prohibited weapons statute. That Texas law changed the state definition and removed some of the requirements where they had to be NFA registered items to avoid state prosecution. Essentially, that bill didn't nullify the federal law by any means, but it removed some state penalties. The South Dakota law is doing something very similar. We are now seeing multiple states essentially say that we will not mirror the NFA at the state level, and that is significant. Now, I also want to reference another law that was passed in the state of Texas. That was the Texas Suppressor Freedom Law. Some of you may remember that. That was HB 957. We talked about some lawsuits that went through the state of Texas in federal courts involving that state law. HB 957 was essentially an attempt to go further by claiming that suppressors made within the state of Texas and remaining within the state of Texas were exempt from federal regulations. The South Dakota law is not that aggressive, I will note. It doesn't go that far. South Dakota is not telling the federal agents there what they essentially can do or what they can enforce. It is simply removing state criminal penalties from these items. That makes it kind of narrower and more defensible legally because it is within the state's power to remove their own criminal codes and their own restrictions on suppressors and say, no, we are not going to put state laws in place which criminalize these. We're going to only leave that to the federal law. And again, this all comes during a time when there are multiple lawsuits aiming to remove the federal NFA restrictions which still remain even after the new $0 tax on these items. While states are stripping away their own enforcement, the NFA itself is under serious constitutional pressure and attacks through multiple lawsuits. As we discussed in prior videos, Congress reduced the NFA tax to $0, which is currently in effect, and there have been multiple plaintiffs and lawsuits which are arguing that without the NFA tax on these items, the NFA loses its taxing power justification, and that congressional justification for this no longer remains, and so the remaining NFA restrictions need to be done away with. Now, currently the DOJ is still defending the NFA and the remaining restrictions, but like I mentioned in a prior video, in one of those lawsuits, evidence has been submitted that the ATF is still exercising discretion for NFA approvals, and that undermines one of the main arguments that they made in this other lawsuit, saying that the NFA operates as a shall issue scheme and therefore is permissible under the Second Amendment. But new evidence shows that they are, not doing shall issue permitting. They're not just issuing these on a shall issue basis. Instead, they are using pure discretion to still deny these applications. So currently we have pressure from two different directions. You have states removing state level enforcement, and then federal courts questioning the NFA's constitutional foundation after the $0 tax change. So you may be asking, okay, what does this bill actually mean? What does this new law actually do? So I want to be clear, the federal law regulating suppressors still exists. Suppressors remain regulated under the NFA, even still within South Dakota. You still need ATF approval. You still need to comply with the federal registration requirements, even with the $0 tax change. South Dakota's law does not erase federal law, but what it does is it eliminates the double exposure problem when it comes to, criminal prosecution. In many states, you could be prosecuted under both federal law and state law for the same exact item. South Dakota, like some others, just eliminated that state side of the equation, and that is significant because they're saying we are not going to do the job for the federal government. If the federal government wants to go after you under the NFA, they can do that, but we're not going to help them here within the state. So this kind of just shows a bigger trend that is happening currently within the nation. First, Texas and Tennessee removed the SBR state prohibitions, and now you have South Dakota removing the suppressor restrictions and removing that language about controlled weapons. Meanwhile, the NFA structure is being attacked in other federal courts like in the Northern District of Texas, and states are signaling that they no longer are willing to mirror every single federal firearms restriction. They're not going to just do that automatically, and they're not going to do the job for the federal government. And if the federal courts strike down or limit the NFA registration scheme through some of these new lawsuits, these states that have put in place these types of laws are already very well positioned to be ahead of the curve and implement any changes that happen through these lawsuits. So this is not just significant for South Dakota, this is about a coordinated shift in how states are currently approaching the NFA and these type of items within their state. So that is what's currently happening with the Suppressor Freedom Law that just passed in South Dakota. I would suspect that maybe more states will do this as well as momentum, kind of gains on this whole NFA question. And hopefully some of these lawsuits also get positive movement to further, support these state laws that are being put in place. So as we get more information, as it develops more, I will let you guys know. If you like this video and you would like to support the channel, one of the best ways to do that is simply to like, comment, and subscribe. All of those things help to fuel the algorithm. But as always, thank you so much for all of your support. And never forget, this nation was built by armed scholars, and this nation will be maintained by armed scholars.